Cybersecurity is about more than just technology. It's about how people behave with emails, data, and cloud applications that directly impacts your company's security posture. Security works best when it's ingrained in the culture of your organization. To learn how to build a security culture and transform your employees from targets into a strong line of defense, head to securityweekly.com/proofpoint and visit their Cybersecurity Awareness Center. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Join us for our next live webcast on November 11th, Veterans Day. That's right, to learn key insights and takeaways from the 2021 OWASP Top 10. There'll be multiple hosts, including Jeff Williams. He's the co-founder and CTO of Contrast Security. Was also kind of instrumental in creating the OWASP Top 10 list. So make sure you check that one out. Join us on December 2nd to see what's under the XDR hood. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to save your seat. That second one on December 2nd there is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks. Kind of funny story. The time change just threw me through a loop, and I was up at like 4 in the morning, and so I decided to just go downstairs and chill out and not wake anyone up. And I put ESPN on because those of you that play fantasy football, like I got roped into it. Like Wednesday morning is the morning where your waivers go through, and it's your best opportunity to make like adds and drops to your fantasy team. So I had the ESPN. They actually have a show on fantasy football, believe it or not. And there was an advertisement from Palo Alto on the show. I was like, oh, we stuff with them too. That's kind of neat. You seem thrilled, Larry.
Yay, sports ball. Sorry. Oh,
I know, but I've been. My wife's like, why are you're doing a lot of? I hear you talking about football like a lot, and I'm like, what do I not like to do? And she's like, lose. I'm like, yeah. And like, really, my goal is to not be in last place. But like, the best way to ensure that you're not coming in last place is try and be in first place, right? So that's my goal. And so I'm like in like third to last place. So.
Unrelated. There's the two gentlemen that both lived at the same time. One, the man that invented the Ferris wheel.
Yes.
And the other one that invented the merry-go-round.
They go in separate circles.
Yeah, they never met. They go in separate circles.
So what happens when Larry and I get our jokes from the same? Well, I guess if there were dad jokes, would it be a database?
Yes. Yes, it would.
Oh boy. Sorry. That was really
Moving right along.
Sachin Mahajan is a developer intern at InGuardians, also where Larry works, and a lot of other people's names you might recognize. He's an aspiring pen tester and drone enthusiast. He joins us today to discuss UAV restrictions, regulations, and MAVSH. I'm going to say MAVSH or MAVSH. Is it MAV?
Oh, if you hear me, MAVSH.
MAVSH.
Yeah.
Sachin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be on the show. First time actually being on a podcast. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Sachin. How'd you get your start in information security?
So I did an internship or two. I started it as an intern at Symantec, and I was doing some endpoint work and some other software work.
Yeah.
And
now, did you go to school?
I did at first, and around the time that I stopped, well, a few years ago I stopped going to school actually because I started getting into drones. Also kind of wanted to know what exactly I wanted to study. So at the time I had switched majors to computer science. I think that was 2018.
Yep.
And
so you were in college and you switched to computer science?
Yeah, I was studying pharmacy at first, then switched over to computer science, and I wasn't really at the time feeling school, I guess you could say. And I stopped going to school. I started building drones, just learning how to build them myself, and slowly starting to learn how to program a bit through programming them. And yeah, I haven't been to school in a little while, but I'm actually looking to go back to school.
That's great. You don't have to justify it to me, man, because I mentor our interns here, and I don't want to say I tell them not to go to school, but I try and tell them how to hack the system so they pay the least amount for school so that they can get a job, right? So your story really resonates with me, because I also see a lot of students that come to me for advice, and they just get stuck. And I think pressure from their parents and friends. They get stuck, like, I have to go to a 4-year school and get the sweatshirt that says the name of the school and all that stuff. And I'm like, if you want to do that, that's cool. Like, I wouldn't discourage people from that either. But there's lots of different paths, right? And like, I love your story because it's not what I think many in this country think of as the path to like going to school and getting a job kind of tradition, right?
Yeah, it's been a pretty big challenge in terms of just like what you said, pressure from parents and friends, not having a full-time job or much to prove myself or like show for what I've been studying, what I've been doing, other than finally getting to speak at DEF CON's been kind of stressful.
Wait, so you like got into drones, taught yourself programming, and you've spoken at DEF CON?
Yeah. I spoke at DEF CON for actually a project involving this little thing.
Nice.
Yeah. It's MAVSH. That's what I mentioned I would want to talk about earlier. Basically, I'll give you a TLDR for now. I'm not sure if we'll get more into it later. Yeah, there's a little Raspberry Pi 0W on the bottom of the drone over here. And basically, there's a bunch of new restrictions which say your quad has to be under a certain weight. Otherwise, you have a lot of regulations and other bullshit to deal with. So the project was to try to be able to actually control that Pi without using any Wi-Fi card or any other gear that I have to add on board. So it also should be able to like hover around and connect to a network and then scan what's on the network and do anything that I so choose to do after that. And that was all done over a telemetry system, and that was what my talk was about, actually.
That's awesome. So, you're hacking drones, but also kind of hacking the regulations as an extension of that, which is great.
Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, that's how I ended up learning a lot about what I have taught myself so far, and kind of why I actually want to go and learn more about electrical or computer engineering, more in the area related to hardware, less than software, because I feel like a lot of software is just logic at the end of the day, and at least building it isn't that, or building and understanding it isn't as challenging as I think being able to do the same thing with hardware is.
Yeah, no, I
okay, the software mafia have just taken out a contract on your life.
No, but I appreciate that, and I love that. Like, I want to encourage folks to pursue this type of path too, to be like, I just want to go mess around with stuff and figure out what I like before I go commit to any other kind of formal training, or whether that's college or whether that's jobs or interns or fellowship, whatever it is, right? I feel like everyone should have that opportunity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too, because like most people get out of high school and they just go study some random degree, spend thousands of dollars, and then don't really even know what they want to do with that at the end of the day. But I mean, you make money earlier. It's a little less stressful in that sense. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Did your high school have programs, Sachin, where you could do that? Because I know it's not at every high school. The one locally here where I live, in Coventry, Rhode Island, has some great programs where even your first year in high school, you can take 2 of the kind of technical school or CCAP kind of programs, and you can try out 2 programs before you go into stuff. And they've got an engineering one that they do drones and 3D printing and stuff like that. But I know that's not in every high school, and I wish it was.
Yeah, that sounds super sweet. I actually don't think my school had something like that, although we did have an engineering class. It's funny, though, because I wanted to take it when I was, I think, a freshman or sophomore, but my mom convinced me to end up doing debate, which has been really useful for other things, I'd say. But yeah, didn't really get to experience any of the engineering side earlier. I'm surprised that school has it, though. Just curious, where are you based out of, and like what school is that?
Yeah, this program's in Coventry, Rhode Island, and there's select number of high schools that I know have programs like that.
Realize it's Rhode Island. It's the smallest state, so it's like 3 high schools within 30 feet of each other. Yeah, and they're like 5 students each, something like that. It's nothing huge. So.
Yeah, probably easier to fund that way as well.
Yeah, they're also limited, though. I mean, Josh, kind of to your point, right? Like, and my son was looking at the automotive program as well. I know. But like in the automotive program, they only accept 18 students in the automotive program, and 100% of them get jobs when they grad. Like, they stick with the program throughout high school. 100% get jobs. and they're pretty much on a very fast track to make over six figures in the first couple of years, which is pretty amazing.
That's kind of sick.
Yep.
In Delaware, where I am, they have the Zip Code Academy, I think it's called. And so you apply. There's a tuition to go to the Zip Code Academy. They teach you to be a developer, but you don't have to pay the tuition. Your employer pays the tuition. They hire you when you get out of Zip Code Academy. They pay the tuition. You get a slightly lower salary by like a couple of $1,000s. It's nothing huge. And basically, because employers are so desperate for developers and people that can do, they do software right now. They're working on adding hardware, firmware, and so on and so forth. They find that a recruiting pipeline is incredibly useful, cheap at the price.
It's awesome.
So there are a few of these things going on. As a matter of fact, my local library, so Delaware, the other tiny state in the union, let's be clear, my local library, which we're about to be able to get back into, has a 3D printing lab. And I'm looking forward to being able to use their 3D printers.
So Sachin, what made you want to do like drone stuff? Was it just like a kind of fascination, or?
So short story about that, actually. I was, right when I had switched majors to CS, I found this club when I was wandering around on club day, and Student Aerospace Initiative. And they mentioned that they needed help building a plane, or like programming an Arduino that they were going to put on a small foam plane. It was supposed to be just a simple feedback control system. And when I was working on that, I was like, hell yeah, I don't know how to do any of this, but let me try it at least. Let me see what I can learn. Sounds kind of sick being able to build planes and learn how to program some stuff. And when I'm working on that project over summer, I found a drone in the back closet when I went to go get supplies, and it was super strange because it didn't look anything like a DJI drone. Like someone had actually built this thing. It wasn't just, like I said, a DJI drone. And I wanted to be able to fly it, but we didn't have the gear to fly it, apparently. We didn't have the controller. And so I took it apart and was trying to figure out how it worked, I guess, how people managed to even do that. And I got fascinated with that like instantly. And so I spent some time trying to figure out how to build them like, from the ground up, and learning how to solder, learning a little bit about electronics. And from that moment, I actually at the same time had been getting into CTF a little bit. And I kind of put those two things together and was like, I want to make a drone that can hack something, even though I have no clue what that looks like, no clue how I'm going to do that. I want to figure out how to do that. And kind of spent the next like year, 2 years or so learning about some of those components, putting them together. And then after I had that end goal in mind, it just became like figure out how to do all of this stuff, figure out what this is going to look like. And I kind of had that project, that end goal in mind. And so it became pretty easy to slowly build up towards that. And I mean, drones are also really fun to fly. You learn a lot about a lot of different things. And so, yeah.
Sachin, tell me a little bit about the regulations before we dive into your project, because the regulations have changed, correct me if I'm wrong, quite substantially in the past few years.
And they're also changing like what feels like every other day. I remember when I was creating my presentation, in the middle of making one of the slides, I get a message on my Discord group, and it's like, oh, new regulation out that anyone who wants to fly has to pass. Even though it's like a quick online test, it's just so much stuff going on in the drone world. And it makes some sense because you don't want companies that are creating drones for delivery services, for example, to be flying around at the same time where there's a bunch of hobbyists flying their quads, things to crash into each other potentially, or damage to other aircraft, damage to people's property, and things of that sort. But so some of the newer regulations that have been coming out involve things like remote identification. There's a few other, I'll get into that a bit more, but there's a few others, such as having regulations on a drone's weight. There's some regulations on, what else remote ID, the 250 gram rule. There are regulations on, why am I blanking out? I'm sure
like
I'll get to it.
How high you can fly it, and then there's also, I don't know
the weight of the drone.
But there's regulations like near an airport.
Yeah, which
those
zone
have
you're
been
in.
there for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, the zones as well. So I'll start with the zones, I guess. So a few years ago, you would have certain areas where you're not allowed to fly, right? Places around airports, places that might be like national parks you're not supposed to fly in. Other federal protected lands you might not be able to fly in. But
over prisons, we cover a lot of stories where people fly drones over prisons and drop contraband. We've covered quite a few stories about that. It's pretty popular. In fact, Max Butler, aka Max Vision, was implicated in one of those incidents.
That's interesting. That's one that I've never actually heard about, but it sounds similar to an idea that I had. Although I don't know if I can get into that idea on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting. I really didn't know you couldn't fly over prisons. Are there any other specific areas you can't fly over?
Well, I don't know. Are there laws that you can't fly over prisons, or is it just kind of frowned upon? Like I've never tried.
I'd imagine it's a law.
I imagine that it's
actually
a no-fly zone. A no drone fly zone.
Yeah, no drone fly, whatever. The weird one is I live in Delaware. Do you know who else lives in Delaware?
The vice president? No.
Now current president.
Oh, interesting.
He lives about 2 miles away from me, 3 miles away from me. So there's a very large no drone zone that actually and they not only took away people's. You were talking about the FAA license you have to get to fly larger drones or whatever. Several people that lived in that area had their licenses revoked, as well as quite a few FFLs. Federal firearms dealers had their licenses revoked because they were too close, apparently. That's hearsay. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I was told.
Wait, I'm curious. Do you know anything about like the type of drones that they're flying? Because what is the enforcement mechanism on that? Are they actively searching the skies, or is it if you're using a quad or drone, which might be like using a DJI app, for example, or some app which has a temporary flight restriction or permanent flight restriction built into it?
Well, I will tell you that in my case, for the one near me where President Biden lives, as far as I know, they just shoot them down. And then they find you and they threaten to shoot you unless you lay down and put your arms behind your head and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of the permanent flight restriction, I don't think so because he's only president for a certain amount of years. However, I don't know how well the over-the-air sort of update goes on that. But I will say that I'm very well aware of a few different resources for doing anti-drone work. Several good friends of mine have worked on anti-drone stuff. One of them is that DJI has a specific frequency you can use to take it over. One of them is that drones have a set of frequencies that they use, not just the DJI. And he has actually an active anti-countermeasure in that he's actually selling now to law enforcement and federal and everything else. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I interviewed a company that did that, Spotter RF. They could, through radio frequency identification, tell the difference between a drone and a bird. That's how much they had tuned the kind of like ML to be. Because I mean, as a human, right? You could look at a drone and look at a bird and understand the differences. They had trained a computer algorithm to do the same thing using RF. That's
sick as fuck. Wait, who did you say did that?
It's a company called Spotter RF.
Spotter RF. Okay, I'm pulling them up on Google.
Yeah,
to read
it's
or
pretty
search
cool.
Through later.
Yeah, you'll definitely find that company interesting, Sachin.
Okay, sweet. I got it.
So, you then embarked on putting a Pi Zero on a drone. What like class drone did you kind of start? Because like there's different classes of drones, correct?
Yeah, I would think so, but I'm not too familiar with the class types, I guess. I kind of just, as a racer as well, I kind of just classify them by their, like, by the inches of the propellers, not gonna lie. That's sort of how I know them. But what exactly do you mean?
Well, like are certain drones that are of a certain weight and can fly to a certain altitude classified differently, right? Because there is a thing where once the drone gets to so much weight and can fly to a certain altitude, it has to be registered. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you're right about all of that. I'll be honest though, still I don't know much about the different classes. I've looked into it a bit, and I know that with your license you can fly certain class drones. To be honest though, that's never something that I've considered until I would want to do something professionally with drones.
Right.
And so
right.
my goal has always been to stay under those limits and not have to get any of the licenses.
Right.
And yeah, the first quad that I built, it was a 10-inch. I might actually, I have the frame for it somewhere laying around, but I won't go search for it right now. It was probably large enough to where it barely would fit in my video if I was to pull it up right now. And of course, that thing, my problem with quads of that size, not only is it regulations, it's also just the potential to actually harm someone.
Yeah.
If I'm flying around and I wanted to land on a building and do something, one, super detectable. People are not going to miss a giant quad flying in the sky above their building. It makes a shit ton of noise, and it just is, if you lose control of it for some reason, if any of the components on there go bad for any reason, you can destroy a car. I mean, you could just crash into a car randomly and hurt a lot of people. You can, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that can go wrong that I was just considering. And so I didn't really want to consider that. And so the goal was always downsizing and trying to be as safe as possible. Like this thing, when I was setting up the RC channels, I accidentally toggled one of the settings to invert the direction that it flies, basically, and it ended up just flying straight back into my chest. I got a little cut, but at the end of the day, it was just a little cut. And so, yeah, that was a big concern. Sorry, I rant a little bit.
No, that's
and
all right.
get
Yeah,
off
so
topic a little
tell
bit.
us about the MAVSH project you're working on.
Okay, yeah. So I'd gone through it briefly a little bit. Like I'd mentioned, my goal was to be able to actually. Okay, 1 second. So there's a tweet that I randomly saw, and it was something along the lines of an image with a quad. It was a DJI drone in someone had a picture and it said Red Team Photography Toolkit, something like that. And I saw a DJI drone in there. And I'm thinking, like, if people can use drones for the reconnaissance phase of a pen test, I'm sure they could use them for more than that. Although I don't have any personal experience with that, with physical pen testing or anything like that. But I figured, why can you not just like go fly a drone and land it on a building? Maybe there are a lot of measures which would be able to kind of mess with my project. But being able to go land on a building and recover the drone, which could be controlled to do anything, not just sit and act like as a rogue access point. I've seen one which someone put a Wi-Fi pineapple on a quad and they flew it over, or supposedly could fly it over and just act as a rogue access point. I wanted to do a bit more than that. I wanted to be able to actually control a Raspberry Pi, or control some companion computer, so you have an actual flying shell that can be discrete and can be, you can do literally anything you want with it, since it's just a flying shell, I guess. And so it's interesting. I ended up realizing that there's a telemetry protocol that the quad uses to communicate with your RC controller, right? The protocol that I'm using is called TBS Crossfire. I actually initially bought it because one, it allows me to actually race and get long range if I wanted to fly long distances and just like cruise through mountains or something, if I ever got to build the gear for that. And two, it also would let me forward Mavlink packets to a computer while my quad's in the air. So that's the part that I got really interested in, because Mavlink's it's a simple protocol which has a bunch of messages defined in XML, and you basically are normally you're sending data like GPS data, barometer data. You can send mission commands to say, I want the quad to go fly to these coordinates, hover there, and come back afterwards, or like loiter around, do whatever you would want it to do to create missions. But you can also use it to, I mean, you can send any arbitrary data you want. So my thought was, why not receive that data on the Raspberry Pi and then modify that protocol a bit to be able to like control the Raspberry Pi, have some like service running on the Pi, which is constantly listening for specific messages, and then it like executes some sub-process calls, for example, which is just the current version of how it works. And it'll take in whatever payload from the specific messages I'm looking at, run them in Bash, and then return the output all forwarded over that Mavlink channel. And since I can receive and send that over the Crossfire access point, that kind of became perfect because it's super easy to fit a little Crossfire receiver and the antenna on a quad. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but it might be kind of blurry. It's this little thing over here. It's pretty tiny, so it's super, super easy to fit that thing on literally any quad. You can even fit it on, one idea I had was being able to fit it on a watch, or fit some Mavlink system on a watch and have that transmit Mavlink messages to have a quad follow me around, for example. Might be a Halloween idea, just like have,
or like a great C2 communications channel too on a pen test.
Yeah, it could be. It definitely could be. Like, I would imagine that people wouldn't be looking on the 915 megahertz channel and looking for Mavlink messages, for example.
Yeah, depends on the facility, but probably a small percentage of facilities that would look for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would agree.
Larry, questions for Sachin?
Nope, not at the moment.
You guys work together, right?
Yeah. We have done
yet.
some work together. Yeah, we're getting close, but we've had extensive chats about MAVSH and all that type of stuff. So, my thing, one of the things that I know you missed out on doing some of your DEF CON stuff was to get into some of the technical stuff about what MAVSH does. So you got 20 minutes. Tell us what MAVSH does.
Okay. Let me pull up. Give me a moment. I want to pull up something so I kind of have a mental map of what I'm going to go through. Otherwise, I just end up on long rants half the time.
No, you're fine for this show. So, have you met Paul? Christ, have you met Larry? So, how much does your drone weigh?
So right now it's sitting around 246, I think, grams. So there's almost no room to work with.
And what's your flight time and distance?
So I haven't done any long distance tests because I kind of just haven't been able to replace the components if I was to lose it. But I'm getting around 15 to 20 minute flight time right now. And I'm not sure what to do to optimize that at the moment, but I know some areas that could be improved on are just kind of the design. The aerodynamics might not be optimal, but to be honest, I don't know too much about that area. The frame design was actually built to try to get as long flight times as possible, but it's sort of hard when I'm using a smaller battery. So there's two different batteries that I have, which I can use. One of them puts me over the weight limit, and the quad ends up around 400 grams, I think, and that'll get anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes of flight time, kind of depending on how well the PIDs are tuned and how aggressively I'm trying to fly the quad. And then the other battery is getting that like 10 to 20-ish minutes based on the same things. So doing longer distance flying is a little risky until some of the like autonomous flight parameters or some of the autonomous flight stuff is tuned a bit more. And yeah, I think those are currently what's limiting me with some of the flight times and distances. Distance, like I said, haven't done long distance, but theoretically with the Crossfire system, you can fly. I mean, the farthest I've seen Crossfire get was on a YouTube video and a build designed specifically for really long range flying. It was, I think, 60-ish miles distance, but yeah, that's really, really high in the sky. No real interference, no obstructions between you and your controller. So yeah, it's not really easy to replicate.
What data? So now let's talk about the operational aspects of it. So when you are, let's assume you're going to use this for a pen test or an engagement of some sort. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were like, oh, well, everybody does reconnaissance with these. I want to do more, right?
Yeah.
What's the more? What are you collecting? What are you doing? What are you getting at when you use one of these suckers?
Yeah. So the more right now is really just being able to actually go and land on the building. You could theoretically scan for Bluetooth devices if that's something you're interested in, and connecting to a network and doing some Wi-Fi stuff is basically the extent to where I have it, because again, that weight restriction makes it sort of hard to fit extra gear on the quad. And
agreed.
Yeah, I can't really fit that much other hardware on there. So
I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here for a second. And I mean, years and years and years ago, I met a guy that did a presentation at DEF CON, I think, about drop boxes that he was building that had actually padding in them, inside of them. So it was a hard plastic enclosure with a battery and a set of equipment. It was the equivalent of a pineapple, a couple of other things. And he would literally huck the sucker on a roof, you know, and it just... So he was using the power of his arm as opposed to, a quad rotor, but it was roughly similar type of idea. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Or is there anything else that I can get out of a quad rotor, out of a multicopter, out of a drone that I can't get out of a drop box, which effectively has no weight limit other than I better be able to throw the sucker?
Yeah, just a quick note while you noodle on that, Sachin. I want to say Bruce Potter talks years ago, right, about what did he call it, the Linksys grenade or something? They it was one of the inspirations for our book, because he took a Linksys router and taped a bunch of padding around it and stuff, and configured it so that it would be, like a DOS attack or
the Wi-Fi deauth hand grenade. Yes. And it was something. It was smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, and he could, to your point, Josh, right? He would huck it over, over a wall or something, or throw it in a building, and it was the Linksys deauthor grenade.
So again, I'm not Sachin. I'm not trying to be rude, but okay, tell me why this matters. I mean, obviously, I can go farther than I can chuck something by my hand. Okay, valid. But I have a weight limit, so I'm limited on what I can actually get on the roof or on the building. Why? What extra bits does this get me? It gets me distance. It gets me a little more stealthy than some whack job chucking something padded on a roof. Not that Bruce is a whack job. Okay, Bruce. Never mind. Anyway, but
debatable.
No comment. Have you seen Bruce rant? But I mean, what does this get me? What can it get me? And not necessarily what it is now, but what do you have envisioned for it, man? And correspondingly, of course, Tyler, what could you do with this sucker?
So I've thought about this a little bit. Currently, the stealthiness is the biggest factor, in my opinion, / the ability to be able to retrieve it pretty easily. The ability to theoretically add on, in a world where weight isn't a restriction, you get your license, the ability to add a lot of different components to the quad, the ability to add a lot of different RF gear, and the ability to kind of just leave a quad in a general area and conduct whatever RF tests you want, and the ability to potentially also add some type of, let's say you want to drop a USB device or something, and you want, I don't have any experience with physical pen testing, so my ideas are a bit limited in how exactly you might execute a few things, but the ability to potentially drop a USB that you want someone to pick up and plug in to a system, the ability to do that reconnaissance, get the video to conduct some of those RF attacks, and maybe even to drop the USBs, kind of what my ideas are limited to at the moment.
No, valid. And I'm not trying to say this is very cool stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm just curious where it could go. That's all.
Yeah. So
and Adrian's got some good points. We're seeing this on Slack. He could be on Discord putting those points in, Adrian, and so everybody could see them. But he said, what if it's a 12 building campus that's fenced in? And he's right. That way your drone is the best way to go. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't get hurt climbing the fences.
Right.
That is true. Huh. Some good points there, actually. I'm not sure if any of you all have physical pen testing experience. If you do, I might even have a few questions for you to kind of help me get those ideas going and help me think more about how I could kind of develop this project.
Tyler.
Yes, he does.
So the best way that I've used drones in physical pen tests are usually two ways. There's two really good ones that are practical, and that is if you're able to get to a network. Obviously, if there's wireless that you're not able to get to from a safe distance or easy distance that is crackable or you can gain access to, leveraging a CDMA device on the drone. Where the drone connects to the wireless and the wireless bridges through the CDMA, and then you can hook your C2 or proxy through that via CDMA or LTE. That's the first way we've used that before. The other way is leveraging the drone for surveillance, and that took a little bit more effort because of we had to pull and have synchronization set up for those large video files, and that over LTE took a little bit of time and sometimes wasn't valuable because of the time gap, but it did allow you to gauge guard shift changes, look at foot traffic, see the comings and goings, look for gaps while being inconspicuous. So there's a couple.
But that's a great use case, Tyler, because the kind of stories I've read about physical pen tests, the more difficult ones, you set off alarms and red flags if you're just driving or walking around because you just shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Deviant's going to come on and talk about some of those stories, right? But I think I even said it last week, if there's a facility that's it's not in a densely populated city. I mean, it may be in a town that, has people in it and traffic with cars and people, but if you just kind of roll up in your rental car and you're driving around, you get caught on camera. So having a drone in those situations, like you said, lets you do that reconnaissance without giving anything away. Because as soon as you start giving stuff away, then people are on high alert, and now you've just increased the difficulty of your physical pen test by 10 times.
Yeah, known entities are always a problem, especially in smaller cities and or more sensitive areas, because the same people come and go just about every time. So The other nice thing is for some of the remote stuff, you can identify camera coverage. We've used them to find motion sensors and kind of figuring out when activation on those motion sensors. So you can actually trigger the motion sensor and see if it's alerting during the day if someone comes out and checks it out, without being on premise and getting caught on camera. So there's a couple great use cases that you can leverage. You just have to kind of bridge that gap, and the LTE thing has been our great bridge, at least for some of the things, in order to
you land the drone. You land the drone in that, you battery power it and land it on the roof of the building and create a bridge.
Yep.
That's cool.
Huh. Sounds pretty similar to actually what my goal was, except more on the professional scale, I guess, less so the hobbyist scale. Kind of curious, do you mind going a bit more into that? I'm curious, what exactly that looked like. I don't even know how to replicate what you said, to be honest.
Yeah, so there's a couple LTE hats that we've leveraged on the Pis. We moved to a different device that had a built-in cellular PCI Express card, and it's just prepaid. That's the LTE connection, so you're able to leverage that connection remotely, obviously because it's going over LTE. And you can either SSH or GUI in. What we would typically do was implant the device on the drone with whatever our C2 channel was. From that, you've got that outbound traffic going over CDMA or LTE. And then once you connect the wireless, you're able to leverage that as a proxy and pass traffic through into the local wireless LAN network, which AKA is the corporate network. And you can do things like responder. You can do packet captures to evaluate names for further attacks. We used it to actually gather manufacturer device names and for HID attacks because they were doing USB blocking and even HID blocking based on the vid. So we had to get the manufacturer of what traffic was happening on that network so we could program our USB drops and our rubber duckies for when we got in physically.
That's interesting because if I've got a wireless keyboard, if you intercept that traffic, I know what devices are whitelisted.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and
cool.
or if you're a Dell shop, you're going to have Dell computers that are very, very noisy and have certain traffic patterns and MAC addresses. So I know that you're going to have a Dell keyboard sitting in front of your desk most likely, or you're an HP shop, you're going to have HP keyboards. Therefore, I can program my vid to the similar VID of one of those manufacturers. And if I do plug in, my likelihood definitely goes way up for the possibility of abuse.
Huh, really cool stuff, actually. It sounds like you're actually doing exactly what I had wanted to figure out how to do, but like I said, at a kind of more professional level. So I'm curious now, though, what drones were you using to set this up on? And was there ever a situation where you encountered any like anti-drone measures or encountered anything where your drone ended up getting you in trouble rather than being something that you could use for stealth?
Yeah, we lost a couple drones on the top of a roof because batteries suck, and this was back in the old DJI 1, 2, and 3 days. So payloads weren't quite an issue because they were a massive, four prop drone. So those weren't a huge deal, and we were carrying a very light payload. The crashing of the drone and having to recover it later was a pain in the ass because we basically had to ask the client for it after the engagement was over. So
your success rate isn't great. I've heard stories about that.
Yeah, I mean it's the same with a leave behind device. Like a lot of our implants and stuff that we'll leave behind a
you
keyboard.
Don't expect to get those back. Yeah, especially in a client that might have a public setting like a medical facility. I think it was Josh Wright's story where he had some kind of Bluetooth access point, and he's like, I taped it right under this chair. Oh, someone stole it.
After 3 days of the pen test, his access went away, and turns out that someone stole his access point because it was in the public space. Yep.
Yeah, it'd be really cool if you could figure out how to do good drops for things. We've taped and left behind microphones in a lot of sensitive areas to get phone calls, things like help desk areas. If you could find a way to drop those in interesting areas, that might be another use case.
I find it's uncomfortable when I tape devices to my sensitive areas, but
it
really is. Can't say I've ever tried that,
it would
but
be more
imagine.
useful long term, honestly, from just a technological standpoint. Like from physicals, 90% of the physicals, I'm in a suit and tie. Whatever I can use that's in my pocket will get me in, and usually is what I use. So the more technical and more cute you get, unless it's an ultra secure, hard facility, the harder it is. And usually you get in with the easy wins and using social engineering and some, some good recon and brass balls. That's really where most physicals go. So the less technological you get, the better.
Okay, that's actually... I'm kind of surprised to hear that because I would have imagined it's sort of the other way if you're maybe doing some of the harder physical pen tests, but yeah.
Not the exact opposite.
What's the like? How many organizations have drone detection? Is that really just limited to more of the military and government installations? I would have ventured to guess that most
very
private,
few.
Very few of military
few.
and government have that. Oh, that's interesting.
I would say very few military and government even have that, unless you're talking ultra secure facilities that are doing things like data centers.
Yeah.
Even data centers for bigger corporations. You think of any of the big data mining corporations, they're not doing drone detection. They're relying on dogs and physical guards and good access controls and cameras. In fact, most places are relying on cameras for a lot of what they do. So, again, the less technology you bring, the less suspicious you are, and the better backstory you build. It's all physical at that point. There's hardly any tech. Now, once you get in, you got to have good tech in order to make it happen. Good good payloads and binaries and ways to execute and plug in quickly devices that are leave behind that are, NAC bypassing stuff and getting good call outs over LTE and bridging gaps, over SMB, really stealthy stuff. But
yeah, because you're not walking in with a backpack. Gustavo had this question, right? No. You're not walking into a facility. I mean, you're going to take a couple of, Pelican cases with you. Largely those live in the hotel room, and when you're on site, like you don't have a wheelie or a backpack because then you got like way more of a story to explain, right?
You've got basically three things. You've got a jump drive, hopefully a badge that you've cloned that matches, and a really good backstory with maybe your leave behind device that's in a inconspicuous location on your person.
Yep.
Oh. Okay, I'm starting to get really curious. How did you end up getting into physical pen testing? It sounds like, one, it could be a lot of fun. Two, like you would need to have a really interesting route to end up doing these kinds of things and getting like more skilled at them. So how did you end up getting into that?
You spend a lot of time doing them. Really, there's very little, like you need to know some tradecraft. There's some things you can teach and train, but most of it is learned and done. The hard part is there's not a lot of corporations doing physical pen tests. Even consultancy companies have migrated away from pen tests that incorporate physical because they are expensive. They take time, and usually it's a risk profile that most people aren't prepared or mature enough to deal with. So you end up doing them for interesting companies if you do get to do them.
Okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I had one other question. Someone had mentioned they've seen a bunch of anti-drone measures, and you had mentioned that there's not really that many companies that have those in place at the moment. So I'm curious, like, do any of you expect that to change in the near future, if not the sort of distant future? And
for corporations, no.
Okay.
For things like embassies,
yeah.
Embassies, maybe.
Embassies,
yeah, sounds about right.
And by the way, just to be clear, we're talking several different things here at this end. We're conflating them. Is there a drone around? Is it an unauthorized drone? Is it close enough that it's a problem? And can I take it out? There's like at least 3 or 4 or 5 problems. I don't know if I've separated them out properly. But I mean, drones are everywhere. And is it close enough to me to take that it's an issue, that it's spying on me is a real problem, because you can have a very powerful drone signal. You can have a not so powerful drone signal. The transmitters are regulated, but people fairly regularly get annoying with that. Let's put it that way. So it's a multifaceted problem that is not an easy one to solve. Any of those problems are multifaceted. And do I expect that, Tyler, I think you had it right, embassies, like big important stuff. I like the big important stuff, Biden's house, embassies, that kind of thing. They might have drone detection. Drone interdiction, not for a number of years. Does that answer your question? You're going to be
finding places that have safety. Safety is probably the first place you'll end up seeing them deployed with intervention things. Maybe places like busy airports, large crowds. I would be surprised if we see them in anything that's, within inside of crowd control areas. But, if it's outside of government, I don't see commercial adapting or adopting anything that's intervention, just because the GCs and the lawyers are going to be all over that. Someone's going to get sued because they shot down someone's drone and they have to pay for it. Even though it was in a restricted area, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that happens for that. And I don't think it's going to happen for a while.
Yeah, that's my guess as well, honestly. If it's not happening now, I've already seen at least a few talks on anti-drone measures. I think like Bishop Fox did a talk, and I was looking through some of that a bit. And it seems like stuff is pretty expensive to use, and some solutions probably will work for, I guess, shittier drones, like maybe the Eagles. I don't know if any of you've seen that as an anti-defense measure, but someone somewhere had trained Eagles to go catch drones out of the air.
I saw Wasn't that Kazakhstan? Wasn't that like a country, Kazakhstan or something like that, trained that?
I honestly don't remember. I just found it pretty interesting that like the measures are still developing so much, and some countries are getting really creative with them, to be honest. A friend of mine showed that to me, and they kind of laughed at me when my solution was just get good at flying your drone. So, yeah, again, I don't know where I was about to go with that.
So, Sachin, your project is open source, is that correct?
Yeah, it is. There's still a lot that I need to update on it. I
think that's every open source project, just to your credit.
Yeah. I'd rather not go into too many details about it, but yeah, I did open source it right now. It's on GitHub. I can send the.
Yeah, we actually have the links to it. They're in the show notes.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, yeah, I'd rather not go too into that right now. Just a long story about some stuff. But it is open source. The code is there right now. There is not really a README there right now. And there are blog posts which are slowly being worked on, but it is quite slow at the moment. I've only posted 2 of them. There need to be at least 8 or 9 which kind of go through all the content. And yeah.
Life happens.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, life happens.
So, Sachin, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I guess so.
3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe myself?
I see you've schooled him in the art of answering the question, saying the question back to the person.
This is all him.
Yeah, good.
This is all him.
Well played, sir. Well played. Buying yourself time. 3 words to describe yourself.
The first one would definitely have to be curious. The second one, I've heard this one a lot, so I guess I would have to go with it. Creative. Then the third one, maybe obsessive. I think those would be pretty good.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Okay, I'm gonna give a fake answer. So the first one, a drone with a gun on it.
Nice.
A drone with a suppressed gun on it.
You only need one. You only need one.
Okay, we'll go with that then.
Yeah.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
This one might require a bit more thought.
That's a good title. I like that. That's a great title. See that? You came up with the title right on top of your head.
See, there are no wrong answers. This is a quick thing. So,
Sachin, what is your? Did you have another crack at that?
No. I was gonna say I'll just go with that one.
Okay, that's perfect. That's actually one of the best book titles for someone.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Sachin, what is your favorite hacker movie?
My favorite hacker movie. I haven't seen that many of them. Hackers, I guess.
Cool.
My favorite show, of course, though, hackers related, Mr. Robot. Not a movie, so not really the answer to the right question. But
good answers.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
And there are no wrong answers here.
Yes, there are.
In a world where there's no wrong
there's no
answers.
answers that are wrong, but there are some answers that are just wrong.
Yes, very true.
Is it bad if I can't even instantly come up with 2 celebrity names off the top of my head?
Oh, they can be like, people from fictional works, comic books,
and honestly,
history.
And honestly, your own very own parents could be celebrities in your own mind.
2 people.
Aww.
This is the one that has me stumped the hardest.
Start with the dad. The dad tends to be easier for some reason.
His parents are listening, going, "Don't you dare! Don't you dare!
Don't you dare embarrass me!"
Can't believe this is the one that actually has me stunned.
It is the hardest one.
I'm gonna have to choose a character from a game as my mom. The game's League of Legends. I don't know how much any of you know about that, but the character is Vayne.
Cool.
I think she lost one of her parents to a demon, and dedicated her life to slaying it. And so the kind of passion or obsessive passion almost in going after that goal would make me have to pick her. And then Dad.
I mean, it's 2021. We're not putting any kind of gender restrictions on the answer to this question, Sachin.
I'm going to have to just go with my own dad for this one.
There you go.
Aww.
Perfect. Well done, Sachin. Thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed getting to be on the podcast, and it was actually super fun for first time being on one.
Awesome. So glad. With
Good
that,
job, man.
we'll take a short break, come back with the news for this week, a Pano Day, Nmap in your Python, and more. Stay tuned.